Choreomania was a mysterious mass psychogenic illness that began in Europe during the 1020s. It is characterized by the compulsion to dance uncontrollably for a prolonged period of time. The mysterious illness kept recurring for centuries, and hundreds and thousands of people literally danced themselves to death, until it finally came to an end during the 17th century. One of the biggest and well-documented cases of choreomania was the one that occurred during the 13th century. In 1374, on the streets of Aachen, Germany, crowds of people gathered near a river called Rhine, and began to dance in a hysterical manner. They were completely incoherent and frenzied, with no sense of control or rhythm. They were in a state of mania that had overcome both their minds and bodies. Within weeks, this mysterious illness spread to France and the Netherlands. Hundreds of people began to frantically jump and leap for days on end. Another big case took place in 1518, in Strasbourg, eastern France. Sometime during the month of July in 1518, a woman named Mrs. Trophia began dancing on the street in front of everyone. At first, people thought nothing of it. But several days passed by, and the woman hasn't stopped dancing. Within a week, more than 30 other people joined her and began to dance in a similar manner. They literally kept going long past the point of injury. The city authorities were eventually alarmed by the ever-increasing number of dancers. They theorized that more dancing was the solution to this mass hysteria, so they emptied guild halls for the dancers to gather in, encouraged more people to start dancing as well, and hired a couple of musicians to accompany the dancers. Little did they know that this would only make things worse. As many as 400 people were consumed by the dancing hysteria, and they kept going on for days on end, until many of them died from cardiac arrest due to exertion. It is believed that the 1518 incident marked the end of the dancing plague. Did you know that you can actually trick your brain into killing you? I gotta admit, the nocebo effect is more of a psychological phenomenon than an actual mental disorder. It is still interesting nonetheless. The nocebo effect is the total opposite of the placebo effect, which is also another psychological phenomenon. Placebo effect occurs mainly during the presence of a health condition. It is when someone experiences an improvement of symptoms after taking a fake medical substance. This happens because the person taking this fake substance has the strong expectation that it will treat their conditions. This means that you can literally treat your physical ailments by just using the power of your mind. Now, the horrifying opposite to the placebo effect is the nocebo effect. It is when you start experiencing bad side effects after taking a medication, just because you are expecting it to happen. In other words, the nocebo effect refers to the harmful, and sometimes, life-threatening outcomes that result from your negative anticipations and beliefs. The nocebo effect is not only associated with medication. There are many instances where it can occur without the presence of medication. Just because you have a strong belief that something bad will happen to you, whether after taking a medication, or eating or drinking something, there's a chance it might actually happen. During the 1980s in the USA, a group of seemingly healthy men who came from Southeast Asia as immigrants mysteriously died in their sleep for no apparent reason. Doctors were totally mystified by these deaths and were not able to figure out what exactly killed these men. In the end, they decided to give this problem a name: sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome. 25 years later, a professor named Shelley Adler came up with an explanation for the death of these immigrants in her book, Sleep Paralysis, Nightmares, Nocebos, and the Mind-Body Connection. After conducting interviews with Southeast Asian populations, Shelley Adler came to the conclusion that the men were killed by their strong cultural beliefs. Many Southeast Asian immigrants actually believed that the ancestor spirits, who protected them from harm in Laos, would be unable to travel across the ocean to the United States and thus could not shield them from spiritual dangers. They also believed in the existence of a nightmare spirit, referred to as the dubbed Sog. It is believed that this evil spirit would visit people in their sleep and kill them by crushing their chest. This by far is the most logical and reasonable explanation for why a group of 116 seemingly healthy immigrants would suddenly die in their sleep, one by one, for no apparent reason. Especially, just after arriving to the US. Another instance where the nocebo effect killed someone was one that occurred during the 1700s. A group of students decided to play a prank on their medical professor's assistant because they disliked him. They kidnapped him and told him that he was about to get beheaded. They blindfolded him, laid his head on a chopping block, and draped a wet cloth over his neck. Convinced he was about to die, as soon as the wet cloth touched his neck, he died instantly. Up to this day, scientists still don't understand why the strange nocebo and placebo phenomenon happens. It is one of psychology's biggest mysteries. This psychological condition is by far the creepiest one on this list. Prosopagnosia is a brain disorder characterized by the inability to recognize or see faces. It is also called face blindness. Prosopagnosia can either be congenital or acquired from a brain injury. People who live with face blindness are not able to recognize the faces of their loved ones and friends, or even their own face when they look in the mirror. Just imagine the horror of having to deal with prosopagnosia on a daily basis. The horror of living in a world where everyone looks the exact same to you, and you are unable to know how the person you are looking at truly feels about you, because you can't see their facial expressions. People with prosopagnosia often avoid all social interactions, and they find it hard to form bonds and relationships with other people. It is believed that the first ever case of prosopagnosia dates back to 1976. The condition is fairly rare. Roughly 2% of the general public have prosopagnosia. We all have some kind of fear or phobia. Some people have an extreme fear of things that others see as relatively harmless, such as spiders, heights, social interactions, tight spaces, oceans, etc. While these irrational fears may be uncomfortable to experience, they are completely harmless, because they involve things that are totally avoidable. If you fear spiders, you can choose not to look at them, or avoid places that they inhabit. If you have a fear of heights, you can avoid towers, skyscrapers, lighthouses, etc. Now, what about fears that involve the unavoidable, like the fear of death? Or, something even more bizarre, the fear of food? One strange phobia that involves fear of something that is unavoidable is the fear of sleep. It is called somniphobia. Somniphobia is an extreme irrational fear of falling asleep. People who suffer from somniphobia are convinced that they will die in their sleep, or experience horrific nightmares. People with somniphobia will often spend days, and in rare instances, weeks, completely depriving themselves of sleep due to this fear. Somniphobia is a very serious condition because it may cause chronic, long-term sleep deprivation in some people. Chronic sleep deprivation is associated with a myriad of health problems, like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, etc. Sleep deprivation even increases your chances of dying from an accident. When you deprive yourself from sleep for a long period of time, your brain will not function properly. Your ability to stay alert will be reduced, which will create a serious lapse in attention that, for example, could easily cause a car accident. Heart anxiety, or cardiophobia, is a rare type of extreme anxiety that is fixated on the possibility of experiencing a deadly cardiac event, particularly a sudden cardiac arrest or a heart attack. People with cardiophobia have to deal with this fear on a daily basis, because they believe that a deadly cardiac event may happen at any moment. This causes them to make frequent visits to the emergency room, in order to be reassured that nothing is going to happen. You'd think that after frequent visits to the ER, they'll stop worrying about their heart. But that's not the case at all. People with cardiophobia still continue to fear the worst, even after all the tests have proved that their heart is completely fine and functioning properly. Their extreme anxiety spirals them down a rabbit hole of terrifying thoughts that make them believe they will definitely die from a lethal cardiac arrhythmia. There may be physical symptoms that they complain about, but they are nothing but manifestations of panic and fear. Even though these symptoms happened hundreds of times before, and countless doctors have told them their heart is in good health, they're still convinced it will stop. So that's it for this episode. These were 5 of the creepiest and weirdest mental conditions and phenomena. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, hit the like button, and stay tuned for more videos in the near future. Thank you for watching.